So this morning I want to start out by talking about the wilderness. Can you guys hear me when I walk away from? Okay, so I'll try to project my voice. If you don't know who I am, I have a couple of books out. The most recent is called The Wilderness Journal, and the title actually comes from the podcast that I started before I even considered writing the book. So I just liked the idea that I live in the city, but that's also a kind of wilderness. So I've been like skirting around this idea of the wilderness for a long time now. It's something I miss because I live in the city. You know, I miss trees, I miss water, fresh water, I miss the tranquility of it. And this is what we usually see, right? We see the sort of tranquil, the forestry stuff. The movies kind of give us a different picture sometimes, but of course, even Reese Witherspoon still looks pretty good, right, in the wilderness. Or you could be Captain Fantastic. I have like dreams where I think I'm going to go teach my children how to live in the woods. I like this one. This is me, not. These are some pictures of, these are actual people. These are real friends of mine. I put a notice on Facebook. I'm like, I need to see what people in the wilderness really do look like. When people from the city go to the wilderness, send me your pictures. And I did get a bunch. And the one thing that was striking to me was how much color there is. And I don't know. I just wanted to share that with you to start with. Or maybe this is your kind of wilderness. Does anybody know what this place is? You do? You have children? Or you just really like Disney Wilderness Resort? And I think it says wilderness because of the logs, right? That's what I think. But actually, this is my wilderness. And I think the pervasive thing that comes to me when I think about the wilderness is being surrounded, right? Pressed in upon. That surroundedness is what jumps out to me first. But then there's a second thing, and that is that in places like this, in the forest, in the mountains, there's so much out of my control. I don't have a lot of control over this environment. It surrounds me. It kind of just, it's just all over. And this is an intriguing thought. I thought this was a really good thought. The wilderness is here, whether the landscape resembles desert, mountains, or rainforest, small town, subdivision, or sprawling city. And that comes from, from this book. You're welcome, John. The reason I wrote this book, and I actually was really careful in the introduction to not say this is a book about the Philokalia, because it is not a book about the Philokalia. It's a book about me reading the Philokalia and struggling through it. And the reason I called it the Wilderness Journal was not because it mirrored in any way my podcast, but just because this idea of the wilderness, things pressing in, feeling that surroundedness, the things that are outside of my control. This whole book was written, it was day to day to day. I'd read a little passage of the Philokalia, I would pray about it, I would meditate on it, and then I would realize how little I knew. So well done, Church Fathers. It is, however, a shameless plug because my kids need braces. But there is now a new kind of wilderness. It's not super new, but it's another kind of wilderness. It's this one, right? The internet, cyberspace, this weirdly unsubstantial thing that touches every aspect of our lives nowadays. I'm in my 50s now, so I can use terms like nowadays and whippersnapper and get off my lawn. With impunity, I can say all those things. And back in my day, when we didn't have the internet and we barely had television and we were in our covered wagons. That's right. So this online environment, or the wilderness, has that closed-in feeling as well. So it has that expansiveness. If you think about the city, there's like this expansiveness. In the wilderness, there's out in nature, this expansiveness. And the internet, it's this big thing. But it still feels so closed in, right? It surrounds us. It's uncontrollable. So how does that fit into what we do as creators? Because that's who we are here. We are creators. We are making things. Whether it's your podcast, your poetry, your fiction writing, your blog, your nonfiction, your devotionals, whatever it is you are writing, you are a creator. I would actually say you're a co-creator with the one who made you. So how does that fit into this kind of wilderness? Okay, so if you've never heard me speak before, I do digress. And I put slides in because I think, oh, that's going to keep me on track. But then I go, oh, that's a really cool thing, and it has really nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I should talk about it anyway. So Keynote kind of helps me digress even better. Is the way I like to think about it. Do you guys know what forest bathing is?
Yes.
Right? Okay, don't get excited. It's not bad. It's basically this idea that you go into an environment, and when they talk about forest bathing, obviously they're talking about being in a forest. But I think this is something that happens to us wherever we go. We go into an environment and we do start to kind of soak up that environment, right? It affects us. When you go into an environment like this, you look blissful like this lady. I would be sitting there going, this is really wet on the ground. What is that bug? I would walk through the forest and not have that problem, but I wouldn't look that tranquil sitting. But the reason I bring it up is that if all of our environments influence us like this, imagine what it's like to be online and what that environment, even though you are in maybe the safety of your home, you are still affected by it. By what you see, by what you read, by what you post, everything affects you. And as a creator, this is really important. And as an Orthodox Christian, this is vitally important. I like what Annie Dillard says when she tells us that how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. And it's something I think about actually quite a lot, especially being in a digital wilderness where that wilderness affects me every day. But there's another thing, and that as creators, we can ask ourselves, what kind of influence do we want to be in this wilderness? We can't control it. It is too vast for us. But we should still walk into these things as creators, asking ourselves, what kind of influence do I want to be? What kind should I be? So to begin, it's probably a good idea for me to talk about the terrain. And so here I have to ask myself why I'm going out into this wilderness at all. Because, you could not go online. You could totally do that. People do that. I have read about them. I don't understand them. I love them, but I don't understand them. They have more restraint than I do. So why go digital at all? Because we could save ourselves an awful lot of aggravation. I think about this a lot. I think about, and maybe for me it's like an escapism thing because I have these 4 children who are all teenagers now. And I think, okay, I'm just going to pack it up. I'm going to move us to the woods. I'm going to live in a shack. I'm not going to go online. I'm just going to every day I'm going to get up and pray. I'm going to write for 7 hours. Maybe I'll have a little garden. But it's not really practical, not for me. The same thing is true of the internet. It's not really practical for me because as a creator, there are some advantages to digital. For all of us, there are advantages. So, these are, the first thing is that it's immediate. You post it, it's there. Last night I posted a blog post. Hey, shameless plug, go read my blog. Took me about 30 seconds. I wrote the post, which took substantially longer, but publishing it took no time. It was immediate, it was there, I got a like, I got a comment, I got a share, whatever it was. There's something that feels really good about that too, right? That somebody read what you wrote and they loved it or they hated it or whatever it was. You get an immediate reaction. Somebody's always awake on the internet. The second thing is that it tends to be concise. So you can say a lot in a few words. Blog posts, I think the traditional wisdom has always been that you want your blog post to be probably around, say, 300 to 600 words. People don't want to read more than that unless there's something really salacious in it. So I hear. But for the most part, it's concise. So you can say a lot, you can say it quickly, you can publish it immediately. The third thing is it's shareable. Is that a real word? Was that a word before the internet? I just am curious because I don't know. I don't remember ever saying, oh, here are some cookies, they're shareable. But it's a thing now, so yes. things you write on the internet are shareable, which means that you write something you love, or your friend writes something you love, or somebody you don't know writes something you love, you can share it with them, you can send it to them. It's very weirdly communitarian. So that's a good thing for an author, for a podcaster, for a blogger. It's a very good thing. You can reach this nice, wide audience. People who would never have heard of you before, would never have cared, wouldn't even have thought to even look for you, can find you now. So what you say can be reached. Now there are disadvantages to digital. The first thing is it's immediate. You put it out there it is. You could take it down, but it's still there. I promise you. The internet has a long memory and a short attention span, which is why that concise part is really important. So you don't have a lot of time with your audience to tell them what you want them to know. You have to be pretty good with your words. You have to have that economy of language to be able to say it well and say it quickly, because you have your audience, especially online, for about the first 1 to 2 sentences. That's it. And if you don't get them in 1 to 2 sentences, you don't have them, and they're going to click somewhere else because it's so easy to leave. They didn't have to go to the library and get your book. They didn't have to put it on a list to go pick up. They weren't waiting for it. It's there. They want it or they don't. So that's a downside to digital. The third thing is it's shareable. Something goes live, something is shared, it's all over. I think it was Winston Churchill who said that a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has time to put its shoes on. It's true. And the internet makes that like 1,000 times worse. And the fourth thing is obviously there's a wide reach. So it's shareable, which means a lot of people are going to see it. And probably none of those people know you or care. It's hard to put a face to words on the internet. So this wilderness that we have to navigate, why are we doing? We should just give up, don't you think? As Orthodox Christians, shouldn't we just not do this? Sorry, John. I'm going to get back to saying yes, we should, but okay. Because the problem is we don't have control. And the minute we realize that we don't have control what happens out there, the better off we're going to be in some ways. So we don't have control over who sees it, or who doesn't see it, or where it might end up, or how it may be used to harm us. We do have control over one thing, and one thing alone. Whether we're book writers or blog writers or podcasters or YouTube personalities, this digital wilderness is something we have to engage. And we have control over one thing, and that is what we create. That's all we have control over. Once we've created it, once we've set it free, it's there. So as creators, and particularly as Orthodox Christians, we have to find our way in the wilderness. We have to be thinking about it. We have to be smart about it. And we have to be mindful and prayerful. So the first thought I thought was like, we need a map, right? And I go to a couple places when I think about mapping. I go to the Church Fathers, I go to prayer, I go usually to the Jesus Prayer, but also I go to poetry. Do you guys know William Stafford? I mean, you don't, like, not in real life or whatever, but I mean, like, do you know his work? He's a beautiful poet. This is one of my favorites. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. This is hands down one of my favorite poems. William Stafford is not an Orthodox Christian, but I like the idea of the thread. And I think it's important. I think it's good for us to think about. Because we all have our own particular way of writing. Not everybody here is going to write the same things or use the same kinds of words or phrasing. But we have one good, strong common thread, yeah? All of us in this room? Do I have to tell you what it is? Not going to. You know. There's so much that even can go wrong with that one thread, right? As I'm sure some of you know. I'm going to show you guys, this is really cute. I'm just going to show you that because I liked it. That part at the end where she goes, yeah, like, what? I'm sorry, I like that. I'll go back, hold on. Oh gosh. All right. Not. Everybody will say to you, oh, fighting on the internet, it's like nothing. Well, you know what? It does cause damage. It is hurtful. It's not without harm. It can be very destructive. So I don't do it. I really don't. I did when I first got on the internet. I was one of those people who thought, I can reason with them. Well, no, you can't. You can't. It's not worth it. Don't do it. I don't have the energy for fighting or hate or anything like that. My song is love. That's all I have. It is all I have. So I choose that. So you can do what you want on the internet. If you want to go and fight with people on the internet, you go, you do it. If you do it well, then bless you forever. But I can't, and I'm not going to. So if I can't control that, all I can do is err on the side of beauty. That's what I do. That's what I want to do. I don't know if I do it well, but that's what I hope for. If you can do more, that's awesome. Do it, please do. But today what we're going to talk about is beauty, how to choose the beautiful, how to show it, when to show it in this wilderness. Let's see. Oh no, we're going the wrong way, man. Okay. So knowing that we all have that thread that Stafford talks about, especially, as Orthodox creators, we should think about what that is for you. And I want you to be maybe a little more for yourself, if you want to make a note. The way I understand the thread that I hold on to, maybe slightly different color or gauge, or what is it, Catherine? I don't even know what it's called. Gauge, weight, right. But you should think about, as a creator, what is your thread? What does it look like? Is there a phrase? Is there a concept? Is there a saint? Is there what is your thread? Think about it. Have it in the front of your heart all the time. Every time you create something, hold on to the thread. Don't let it go. For me, it always comes back to beauty. And I think that's kind of true of all of us, right? Because the love of the beautiful is kind of at the heart of our faith. But our task, I think, as Orthodox creators, is to identify beauty, embrace it, and then report about it. So that's what I'm going to talk about briefly today. Let's start with identifying. Oh, Basil Rathbone. Oh, gosh. All right. What are these things we're sharing? What are these beautiful things? How do we know what to write, what to record? So it's all about kind of coming up with those good ideas. Has anybody here had any problems I don't know what to write about? What's a good idea? Oh, good, I'm so glad. Same thing. I think we all have those moments. Some of us have a lot of moments like that. I usually kind of go back to what I'm paying attention to. So I want to talk briefly about what is beautiful. What is beauty? Well, there's this very simple, super easy answer, and it's true of everybody. Wrong. No, there isn't. There's this idea that beauty's in the eye of the beholder. The beauty is subjective. It is kind of a complicated thing, though, although I think St. Maximus kind of nails it here, where he says the beautiful is identical with the good. And I like that. For all things seek the beautiful and good at every opportunity, and there is no being which does not participate in them. That's really cool. Think about that there is no being that does not participate in them. They extend to all that is, being what is truly admirable, sought for, desired, pleasing, chosen, and loved. Those are my favorite two words in this whole passage, chosen and loved. Well, I like all the words. But those, like to end there, I thought, yeah, these are the things, that's part of my thread, knowing that I'm chosen and loved. And part of the process of being a creator, being an Orthodox Christian creator, putting it on the internet, there's a degree of vulnerability that we adopt. Now, not everybody here writes memoir. I write memoir. You guys know a lot about me if you've read my books. You do. You know who I am. If you read me who I am online, that is who I am. If you talk to me in person, you will know that very quickly. It's hard to know what to share. It's hard to know what to write about, what not to say, how much to put out there. Because again, as I said, you can be hurt by it, and you probably will be. One of the things I had to do was think about what was beautiful to me and how I knew that it was beautiful. It's another shameless plug. I wrote this book too. But for me, the way I came to an understanding of beauty came through the Jesus prayer. That tuning of the heart. And that's something I think as Orthodox Christians, whether you're a creator or not, we should be doing. We should always be tuning that heart. And the way that we do that, when we tune the heart, it shifts how we see beauty. Hopefully in a good way, if we're doing it well. So I want to tell you this story. And I think I've talked about this, like every time I speak, I tell this story. And it's about Sunday school. I teach Sunday school sometimes. I don't know why they let me do that, but they do. And I started teaching middle schoolers 2 years ago. And I like them better. Okay, no, I don't like them better. I like them all. But they're easier than the high schoolers because by the time you get to high schoolers, they're all like, oh my gosh, you're so not cool. I'm like, there are a lot of people who think I'm cool. But if I have to sit in Sunday school and try to convince these guys that I'm cool, then I have a problem. So middle schoolers are great because they automatically think that. And they do what I ask them to do, especially because I don't make them do like homework. What I did was I told them when I started teaching them, and I told my priest this, I said, just so you know, it's going to be a little bit like about poetry all the time. And he's like, okay, that's fine. So what I said was, I said, before we start each week, what we're going to do is we're going to pray. And then I want you guys to bring me something beautiful. Not actually physically bring me anything beautiful, but I want you to identify something beautiful and tell me about it. It could be one word, it could be a sentence, it can be whatever you want. And they kind of looked at me like, what? And I said, well, for example, we're having donuts this morning. It's the first day of Sunday school. Donuts are my thing. So I brought donuts, and I said, this is something beautiful. And they're like, oh, like as soon as they knew that donuts were involved, they're like, psh. So one girl's like, I had my basketball tournament. That was beautiful to her. I'm like, okay. My cat. Okay, your cat's beautiful. Yes. My baby brother. Oh, yes. All right. So they did really well with it. And they really, we did it every week. And I think the thing that saved us really was consistency, doing it every week, right? Storing it up until one day, I don't know, like a couple months in, I sit down, we pray, and all these hands shot up, and I'm like, what is happening? And they're like, we have something beautiful. I have something beautiful. And they're like fighting over who gets to tell me their beautiful thing. And you know what? I was a little bit verklempt. I'm like, what? It works. So they're telling me these beautiful things. And I can't even tell you how much that meant to me, that they were so impacted and that they were seeing these beautiful things. And every time they shared it with me, I saw it too. And that's what we're doing in this room. That's what you're doing with your work. You are identifying something beautiful, you're putting it down, and you're sharing it. Now, the second part of this is embrace. I'm not going to make you go out and hug a tree, but that would be, if you want to, if that's beautiful for you, you do it. But I think that what I want you to do is think about those things that you would find beautiful. And you have to own it. You have to embrace it. You have to really get that thread. What drew you to that beautiful thing, that thing you want to write about? Do you know what it was that made you want to write it? Do you know your motivations? Do you know your heart? Do you know where the thread is, that one that we talked about? If you can find that thread as you work your way through the blog post, the podcast, the poem, the painting, whatever it is, then you're well on your way to doing what you mean to do. See if you can take one moment And I want you to think about it. I don't want to take too much time because I want to leave time for questions, but can you take a moment and think about something beautiful? You don't have to share it with me today. Maybe if you want to even close your eyes or look around the room, whatever it is, whatever comes to you first when you think about something beautiful. And when you have that in your head, I want you to see how it connects to the thread. Maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your husband, maybe it's your kid, maybe it's the breakfast you had. That's okay too. There are no wrong answers. And when you start to think how it connects to your thread, don't make jumps. You don't have to jump at it. Don't make a big leap like, well, maybe it's this. If you don't know, stop, go back, think about that thread again. What is your thread? And then look again. And see where that leads you. And this is all before you sit down and start writing. I love this quote so much, and I share this with pretty much every non-Orthodox person I know when we talk about Christianity. It is not the task of Christianity to provide easy answers to every question, but to make us progressively aware of a mystery. God is not so much the object of our knowledge as the cause of our wonder. I love the word wonder. And this is something I learned also working with kids. Using the words, I wonder, opens their hearts and their minds. And it does the same thing for us. We just forget sometimes. So instead of saying, why did you do that? Even just saying, I wonder why you did that. I wonder what we're doing now. I wonder what this piece is about. I wonder what it is I want to say. When we open wonder, it's just beautifully opening process. And then I want to talk for a moment as well about humility. When we write these personal things, even if you're writing, I don't know, I can't imagine I don't know what people write that isn't personal. I think everything we write comes out of who we are. Maybe if you're writing stereo instructions, not. I don't know if you're publishing that on the internet like as a writer, but whatever, hey, I'm not judging. But we do have to make ourselves vulnerable. That is what it means to embrace that beautiful thing and making those connections between the thread that we hold on to, the beautiful thing that we see. There's a vulnerability that comes in the work that we do. I was going to tell you the story. I'm not really sure why, but I guess because it just occurs to me. Sometimes I get emails, and sometimes they come directly to me. I guess I'm pretty easy to find. And no, it wasn't an email, it was a phone call. I got a phone call from a guy, let's call him Bob. He calls me up and he's like, hi, is this Angela? I'm like, yes, it is. And he said, well, my name is Bob, and my wife loves your podcast. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet to hear. And at the same time, I'm like, ooh. And he said, she's been fighting cancer, and it's her birthday in about a week. And he said, and every year on her birthday, I do something that's really meaningful. He just knows her so well. He knows what to do. He's like, and I know that she loves to read your work, and I know that she loves to listen to your podcast. Would you mind calling her? And I'm like, you know what, Bob? I would love to call her. I would love to call Nancy. Give me your phone number. And so I did. So I called her on her birthday. I'm like, hi, is this Nancy? She's like, yes, it is. I'm like, hi, Nancy. Your husband told me to call you because it's your birthday. And she's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I don't know if you've ever, I don't know why. I said, my name's Angela Carlson. And she's like, what? And I'm like, kind of famous. That kind of thing doesn't happen to me. But we had the best chat. We talked for about a half an hour. It was wonderful. She sent me a note. She asked for my address. I said, absolutely, please come over. She sent me a card that I still have. I keep it in my Psalter. So about 3 months ago, I got an email from Bob. It's been a year, and she passed away shortly after we talked. I didn't know she was that sick. But the day I got his email, I was reading my Psalter, and Nancy, I'm trying not to give the real names. Her card falls out of my Psalter, and I read it again, and I thought, wow, you know what? What we do here is important. is important. It affects people. You should know that. You should know it, and you should pay attention to it. Being vulnerable is painful, it's scary, and it's necessary. So, I'm not going to go too far into this, but I want to talk very, very briefly, because I'm running out of time, about saying beautiful things, saying difficult things in a beautiful way. And Maggie Smith is an amazing poet. I love her work. And you probably have seen this floating around the internet already. But she talks about, this is, in some ways it's about her divorce, and about how she's trying to protect her children from the world, which of course we cannot do. The same thing is true of your writing. You're going to write something, you're going to put it out there, it's going to be like your kid, and then you're going to have to let it go because, again, as I said, you don't get to control what happens to it. But if you want to read through Maggie Smith's work, you should look her up. She's amazing. This is an example of something that's a difficult subject that she says beautifully. My favorite fiction writer is Cormac McCarthy. Have you guys read Cormac McCarthy? Wow. I read his books and I go, why am I reading this? This is so difficult. I can't stop because it's written so beautifully. You can say difficult things. You don't have to just write things that are fluffy, even vulnerable things that are like, oh, I'm so sad. Yeah, okay. You can write difficult things, struggles that you have, realities that you are facing. And if you do it beautifully, you hold on to that thread, people will read and it will affect them, hopefully in a good way. I love this quote from Frederick Buechner. Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. And this is the part I think where a lot of us get stuck. You write this thing, you know it's beautiful, you know it's vulnerable, you know it's necessary. Do I publish it? I have this thing. I think everybody should write their life. I don't think everybody should publish it. You know yourself better than anybody else. This is the way I go about it. If I write something and it affects me profoundly, and I feel like it's clear and it's beautiful and it's true, I will usually publish it. If there's 1 ounce of me going, maybe not, then I give it a day. Because remember that first thing about the internet? It's immediate. Once it's out there, and somebody is going to jump on it. So even if you grab it within 30 seconds, long memory. The internet has a long memory. It's someplace. So the last piece of this is to report. And there's one way I like to look at reporting that beautiful thing. And it's this poem by Rumi. And I think you probably have seen iterations of this all over the place. Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. At the first gate, ask yourself, is it true? At the second gate, ask, is it necessary? At the third gate, ask, is it kind? So the first piece, is it true? That's a hard one. Truth is one of those things where well, true, and I don't know, is it true for you? Well, this is my truth. The only thing that I do usually when I think about if something is true is the first thing I think is, do I have to look sideways? Do I have to look askance at this? Do I have to kind of bend things around to make it be true? Then I probably shouldn't publish it. And there's another thing that I do. This is going to be a little hard to read because when I was taking notes on the last day of Sunday school, I don't know why I chose a blue pencil on blue paper, but I did. So I'll have to kind of read it to you. I wrote 2019. I'm like, okay, you guys, last day of Sunday school. What do we like? What do we hate? What do we want to do next year? The first thing they said they loved, Sundays of Lent. What? That's awesome. I don't even remember what we did. Whatever I did, they loved it. Okay, the second thing was the schedule. They loved having a regular schedule of things that we did. They liked talking about the main parts of the liturgical year. I'm like, you guys are awesome. I wasn't sure if those are this is what the teacher wants to hear answers, but they seemed pretty sincere. Oreos was next on the list. I fully agree. Lenten, hello. We ate a lot of Oreos. Beautiful thing. They liked the beautiful thing. They wanted to keep doing that. The other thing was a true thing, because the first year I introduced Beautiful Thing, and I had the same kids that I had last year. This year I said, we're going to talk also, I want you to tell me something true. And they were like, what? And the way I explained what was true is I printed out all of the words of Jesus, where he talks about, but I tell you, this is true. So we read through all of those verses. I said, okay, one way we can know what truth is we look to Christ. Right? And it sounds kind of simple, like it's a pat answer, but it's really not. It's very deep and complicated sometimes, you know? We look to Christ. That is our thread. That's the only thread we really, really need. And if you feel like you have to kind of twist things around so that Jesus would be all like, well, I'll let it go this time, maybe it's not something you need to put out there. We look to Christ. That's the best way to know truth. St. Theophan puts it this way: truth is akin to the Spirit. When it is uttered simply and sincerely, truth finds the Spirit. When it is surrounded by images and is figurative and embellished, it remains in the imagination. When it is encumbered with concepts and arguments, it is detained in the intellect of the soul, not reaching the Spirit, which is left empty. One could say that all unfruitful preaching is on account of the intellectualizing that fills it. Just explain the truth in a simple way. Say what it is, and the Spirit will be overcome. Now, of course, I write very flowery, poetic, so I had to read this a few times, like, well, St. Theophan, are you saying? No. Say what you need to say. Just say it. Be simple. Be vulnerable. The last gate, is it necessary? This is really tough because there isn't much that hasn't been said on the internet, right? And I think that's sometimes we get stuck as writers where we go, well, I don't know, everybody else wrote this already, or this poem's already been written, or this story's already been told. Maybe. But I think it was Maya Angelou who says that, you know, there's nothing worse than an untold story inside of you that hasn't come out. I so totally butchered her phrase. You should just Google it. You know, if there's a story inside of you, if there's something you want to tell, it may be necessary. You may say it in a way. There are, you know, millions, maybe billions of people who read things on the internet. Maybe yours is the one that makes the guy call you on the phone and say, will you talk to my wife? That's huge. I think that's huge. I don't care how many books I sell. Sorry, John. That one person, listen to my podcast. That's it. Like, I'm done. That's all I needed to do. And I mean that sincerely. This other piece, though, don't break the silence unless you can improve upon it. And I can't find it, and I know probably one of you guys know, but one of the fathers talks about improving on the silence. He doesn't use the word improving, but that, you know, silence obviously has strong, it affects us strongly. So if you're going to break the silence, it should be something that's worthy of breaking the silence. And then, is it kind? And this is kind of where I ended up with all of this. Sometimes I think kindness gets a bad rap. You know, like, oh, it's kind, you better be kind. No, kindness is a deep, deep theological concept. What it means to be compassionate and loving and caring and good and true comes out as kindness. And you know what kindness is? It's action. You can have a kind thought, but being kind to somebody is action. It's what you do. It's how you are with people. And it can take us a long way as creators. If you read something you've written and before you've hit publish, you say to yourself, well, that sounds a little unkind. Well, you know what? Maybe you need to pray about it a little bit. And I mean that. I don't ever tell people anything about prayer that I don't mean from the very depth of my being. To me, prayer is not a Band-Aid. It is not a thing I toss off. I take it incredibly seriously. If you have any hesitation, that pounding of the heart, you know what that feels like before you're about to hit send on something, an email you've written that's really hard, or something on Facebook you want to respond to and you got that pounding heart? Well, you pay attention to that. That's adrenaline, yeah. But maybe it's also the spirit going, you know what? Let's just take a beat here. You don't have to be peaceful before you publish everything. I never am. But that kindness piece, is this kind? I have this friend who says, he doesn't argue with people on the internet because he's like, I'm not the idiot whisperer. Which I think is really funny. It's not a very kind thing to say. It's not. It is kind of true, though. It's not your job. It's not a kind thing to have to go in there and correct somebody if they're not asking for your correction, and it's not your place to give it. I don't know. I think kindness is an action we take or don't take sometimes. So we identify beauty, which is this kind of very internal thing. We embrace it, also very internal. We write it down, we put it in our journal or on our laptop, and then you have to decide what to do with it. Kindness is action. If what you put out there is unkind, it's probably important for you to also know that thread, why you put it out there. What did you expect? What did you hope for? Knowing that you have no control over it now. Once it's out there, it's out there. It exists on the internet for as long as the internet is there until the aliens land. I think maybe the aliens will use the internet too. I don't know. Kindness is action. It's how we behave. It's the doing part of being a writer, the sharing part, the publishing part. There's an update to this story. So next year, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them to bring me something kind. Because when you're in middle school, it's a little bit hard to know what's kind. When you're an adult, it's probably 100 times worse. And I don't think sometimes the kids know that it's hard for us to be kind. So next year, if they let me come back, then, because to sit with these guys, to teach them, to talk with them, it's an honor. So if I have the opportunity, then I hope that what I can offer to them is the opportunity to be kind, to bring me something kind, and to teach me how they see that too. Thank you so very much for being here today. And I'll take questions if you have questions. I'm cool to answer whatever you would like. Oh, if you want to come over to the mic, there's only one mic, so. No. Oh, it's just in the...
Okay, hi. I have a question about beauty, and so for me, what I write about, what my thread has to do with race, because I was born in 1961, and it wasn't beautiful. I was on the south side of Chicago in an all-black neighborhood. So a lot of what I write about is the pain in our country that has to do with things that really aren't beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so, but I feel like I really need to write about these things. And it's not just for me. I feel like there is a healing that comes through holding up a picture. But sometimes people don't want to see the picture because of the pain that they feel when they see the picture. Uh-huh. But holding up a picture isn't necessarily to inflict pain. It might be to create compassion or understanding. Right. But sometimes people can't hear that. Mm-hmm. When the things that you present are difficult, yes. The listener sometimes feels attacked or shamed or intimidated or anxious, and maybe that's not your goal. But I can't not write about this. Exactly. It's too important to our country and to the world to do this healing. So how does that, if what you're writing about isn't like immediately perceived as beautiful per se, on the surface level, mm-hmm. how does that fit into what you're talking about in terms of?
I think first you have to find the beauty in it.
Uh-huh.
There is beauty in that struggle. It's an important topic. It's a difficult subject that you can tell beautifully, but that part starts with you. So in a way, and when I talk about beauty, beauty isn't just stuff that's good to look at and happy to look at all. There's beautiful beauty to me is sometimes in the worst situations.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do, is you writing about it and you feeling called to write about it, to me, speaks beauty.
Me too.
So do it and don't stop. But, and start there. There's this horribly difficult thing that you need to write about. And I would use the word need. You need to write about it. You don't have any control over how it's received, as I said. People may not find it beautiful, but that doesn't matter.
Okay.
What matters is that you write it in that way. That's how you put it on paper. I think that if you have integrity and vulnerability, and you know that beauty that you are writing from, it will come out to people. It will convey itself.
And so I'm not responsible necessarily if somebody doesn't experience it as beautiful. If that was
your reader experiences it. You are not.
Thank you.
No, anytime. Please don't not write that.
Thank you.
Will you send it to me when you have it out?
I would love to do that.
I would love to read it.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So you talked earlier in your presentation about finding the thread, and I thought that was a really interesting and profound way of thinking about it. But when you said like to look and find your own thread, I actually found that kind of hard. So how exactly do you find your thread if you don't know what it is?
Well, I think that we start with sort of the major underlying of who we are as Orthodox Christians. It goes back to who you are as a human, really. And then it kind of folds into this next piece, this choice that you've made to follow Christ. And those threads are pretty thick, yeah? So, I mean, we have some pretty good groundwork on what we're following, how we're following Christ. How you choose to do that, what it looks like in your life, is your own particular flavor of that, your own particular color of that. Some people are called into ministry, some people are not. Some people are, can speak about Christ in a very natural way. For me, it's difficult. It's a very internal thing. So I have to do it through poetry usually. But I think you find your method. In a way, it's like finding your voice as an author or as a poet or as a podcaster. You have to find who you are particularly. But as a writer, usually what we do is we read a lot. Yeah? If you want to be a writer, you should be reading. Everybody reading in here? I don't care what you read. It could be Curious George, doesn't matter to me. Read, read, read. And that's what we do first as writers, was we read other people so we can hear their voices. And then we sort of transition into what our voice sounds like. And I think the same thing is true with how we apply our faith, how we live our faith. And when those two things come together, when you start publishing, if you're writing matters of faith, then those things start to come together. If the voice that you're writing in is vastly different from the person you are, and you're not a fiction writer, you probably need to revisit that. Why do you do that? If you're not a journalist writing in this sort of, very third person kind of way, if what you're writing is personal, and I think probably maybe 80% of people who are writing on the internet are writing personal things, you need to sort of make sure that those two things have integrity. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
I considered a lot of the things you talked about here. I used to have a blog like that for 10 years. But the idea of the thread. Could you come to the microphone, please? Okay, sure.
For the people at home.
I wanted to offer another perspective on the thread question.
Sure.
And I ran a poetry blog for maybe 10 years where I wrote poetry in a very traditional style. Like metrical, rhyming, so on and so forth. And there are some more traditional answers to the idea of the thread, which helped me understand what it meant. And there's an idea of like the golden thread that runs through things. And it's really what it is. It's the idea of like, when you look at history, history is a lot of facts, which is to say the things that actually happened. And what is most important to us in history is not so much the facts, although they're important because you need them to tell the story, but how the facts are interpreted. And so the interpretation of facts in history is always storytelling. And the best history, of course, is true, So the interpretation isn't stretching things and
Right.
falsifying things.
Right.
But the idea is that the golden thread is, what is the story that you see in all of these things that is
Sure.
connecting them all together?
Right. Yeah, that's actually a really good way to look at it. And I think that when we look at the balance of our work, when you're first starting out, it's difficult because you don't have a balance of work. You just have maybe that one blog post or that one poem. But I think as you write more, as you publish more, you do start to see that thread come out. And that's where humility plays a big part. When, like, I talk to a lot of young writers who are like, oh, I wrote this a long time ago, I'm so embarrassed about it. Well, that happens just because we mature, right? But there's also a piece of me that says, be real careful if you're a grown-up and you start putting things out there. Are you going to be embarrassed about this later on? Is this something that's going to be like, And I think the more we know ourselves, the more we understand ourselves, the more we are seeking to Christ, those things, they're going to happen, obviously. But if we're following that thread, if we can start to see how it shows up, and I think about like a tapestry, right? You look at the front of the tapestry, this is like such an old cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. The front shows you that picture and it's beautiful, and you turn it around and it's just a mess of strings, like that's the guts of it, right? I think the back of a tapestry is beautiful, right? It's the process. The process might be messy. The result is what everybody sees, but that back part, that processy part, I think that's beautiful. To me, that's like childbirth, Maybe you don't think childbirth is beautiful, I do. So, but yeah, thanks for that.
It's like the underside of the bridge.
Exactly.
You
I think
see
that's
how
beautiful too.
How things connect
Especially
together.
because like sometimes in Chicago at least, there's this water stain that appears on the Fullerton Avenue. Is anybody here from Chicago? Yeah, right? So like the St. Mary the Underpass? It's this water stain that looks just like the Theotokos. So people, they see it, and they go, and they put flowers by it, and it's becomes like a shrine, and then they'll paint over it, and then it comes out again. But yeah, it's that same thing where it's it's like seeing I don't know, Johnny Carson in a potato chip or whatever. We see what we see. That's not to say that it's Johnny Carson, but if it reminds us of that, then anything I think that reminds us to think and pray to the Theotokos, I think is okay by me. So anyway, St. Mary the Underpass. Look it up. Sorry. Thank you for your comment, by the way. That's wonderful. Go ahead.
My wife Nicole and I have a bedtime tradition of saying 3 things we're grateful for for the end of the day. I was wondering if you could compare that with saying 3 things we found beautiful that day.
Yeah.
Sounds like finding beautiful things is easier.
Yeah. Well, it might be easier. Being grateful is not super easy anyway. I mean, you can say 3 things you're grateful for on a really good day, but 3 things you're grateful for on a really hard day, that's a little harder stretch, I think, for me. I think that things that I'm grateful for, things that are beautiful, I think they're hand in glove. Yeah, for sure. And in fact, I would say that that something beautiful is the observation, and being grateful is the action, right? So you observe it, and then that's the embracing part, that you're choosing to be grateful. Because good things that happen to us in our lives, we're not automatically grateful for them. I'm not sure you guys know this. I know it's true for me, but yeah, those are absolutely fit together beautifully, yeah. Thanks for that.
Going back to the idea of finding beauty in the hard stuff, obviously when we look at God, that's pure beauty.
Yeah.
But when we look at our lives, we never see pure beauty. We see beauty that comes out of ugliness and suffering and difficulty. I write murder mysteries. Murder's not beautiful, but I write about, in the midst of all that, I write about redemption, forgiveness, love, community. And, so we can find those beauties in the worst circumstances.
Right. And that's our task, I think. And in some ways, seeing those difficult things, seeing those ugly things, and drawing the beauty from it, that's how you know that you're a creator. And I think everybody's a creator at some, we mirror that creation part of God. That's where it comes from. But if you can do that, you can take that difficult subject and you can draw the beauty in it. I think that's what makes us creators.
So I have a question about pain.
Oh, yes. Bring it on.
So I'm a fiction writer,
Okay.
and when I wrote this book and I sent it to Jane Meyer, and she said, well, your main character's not very believable. Like, he's just kind of this, everything. He's too holy, is what I was kind of laughing, like, he's too holy. Okay.
I can so totally relate.
So, but I started to think about that, and I started realizing that people are not believable without pain. Like, nobody goes through life like that. So how do you write that? How do you write, pain and those horrible experiences in a beautiful way
Right.
that's still believable and real?
Yeah. I think the better we know our pain, the better we can write about it, even if it's fiction. And I think this is true of everything. Even fiction is true. Well-written fiction is true. True, 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 true. Fiction that lies is a lie, and it's bad fiction. I think nonfiction that lies, obviously, is not a good thing. But we don't think often about the author. When you write it, when I read Cormac McCarthy, I don't sit there and go, wow, he must have had a really tough life, because the fiction writer has this ability to go, oh, well, this is not really about me. But I would maintain that everything you write is about you, because you're not writing in a vacuum. It comes out of your experience, it comes out of your heart, it comes out of your brain. If it's divinely inspired, I hope that's true, because that's what we hope for, is that God speaks with us and the Spirit is moving, as St. Theophan has said. But it's everything you write, even the fiction, has kernels of truth in it that come out of a place that you know. If you've ever tried to write speculative fiction, and create a whole world, and I think this is something maybe that Father Andrew Stephen will talk about tomorrow during their panel about Tolkien, creating whole new worlds like that. I mean, that's quite a task. But even so, you can see the threads, like, okay, well, I can see where this came from. I can see where I look through our human history, and they all have some kernel in them, and that's how we know we can identify with them. Even space stories, that alien cultures that you've never heard of, like, okay, but you know what? There's humanity in it. There's absolutely humanity in it. Nobody would watch it if there wasn't. So yeah, I would say that, but as far as pain goes, the better you know your pain, the better you can write about pain in fictional characters or poetry or nonfiction posts. I actually think pain can be a very beautiful thing. I don't like it in the moment. Nobody does. Nobody wants to have pain. It is, however, part of being human. I think a lot about childbirth. I had 4 unmedicated births by choice. Because I always thought in my head, like, there's a reason for this pain. I don't buy that it's like this. Oh, you're cursed. I don't buy that. I think that God's purposes are always good. And so when I was going through labor, I was thinking about that. I mean, not solely thinking about it, but there were glimmers of it. By the time I got to the 4th one, I got pretty good, and I maybe 5% of the time was thinking about that. But praying through that and going, okay, what is going on with this pain? I'm feeling this because I'm human. This hurts because I am human and alive. Know your pain. Write about your pain. You don't have to publish that. Again, you don't. I mean, be careful. Be protected. Protect yourself a little bit too. But you'll find that thread. When you write that pain, there'll be one line you'll read and you'll go, okay, somebody else needs to hear this too. I don't want to be alone with this, right? That's another good little indicator for if you should publish something. If you don't want to be alone with it, probably you want to take it to your family first, or your therapist, or your doctor, I don't know. But I think for a lot of us as writers, we have to tell the story because we also don't want to be alone in our story. We want to share our pain because we know there's somebody else out there who knows what that feels like. That's why having a doula during childbirth is such a monumentally amazing thing. It helps if that person has had a baby before, but even so, just having somebody to hold your hand. There's this, have you guys seen Lars and the Real Girl? It's a movie, it's so good, so good. There's a part in this movie where one of the characters, I won't spoil it, is dying. And the boyfriend is sitting in the living room, and all these women come over and they're sitting there knitting with him, and they bring him food, and he's just sitting there. He's like, why are you here? And she said, we came to sit. She said, this is what we do, dear. We come and we sit. And I love that, right? Isn't that a great concept? In some ways, as writers, that's what we're doing. We're saying, we know you need something. We need it too. We're just here. We can't fix it. We can't solve it. But we want you to know that you're not alone. So, go ahead.
So my question for you is back to the thread. In my heart, I would love to be a writer, but professionally, I ended up as an editor mostly.
Okay.
And the writing that I've done has been...
Thank you for your service.
The writing that I've done has been profiles or interviews, that kind of thing. So I love what you're saying about the thread and how we need to know what that is.
Right.
And you've said, yes, you need to find it. But could you actually recommend some exercises that people could do? Especially I've spent 30 plus years thinking about the other person's voice.
Right.
So as specific as you could possibly be, like, go off in a cabin in the woods and or read this thing, or find somebody that you're a writing buddy, or what kinds of things have worked for people with that thread thing?
I think very simply and specifically, and it's going to sound too simple, but I want you to write every day. In the morning, you get up, you pray, maybe pray about what that thread looks like in your life. Not so much your writer's voice, but what your personal narrative voice is. And write a paragraph, write a line. I don't care how long it is. Just write. Every morning, pray. Meditate on this idea of what that thread is, what's going to be your guiding principle. That might be another way to put it, your guiding principle in putting words on paper. Don't make it so lofty that it's going to stop you from writing. Because sometimes people go like, I just want to write to the glory of God. Well, everything, hopefully, we write is for the glory of God. It shouldn't stop you from writing. So whatever it is for you, put it down. Meditate on it a few minutes, write a couple of sentences. And it could be that you start with looking and go, okay, well, that grass outside is beautiful to me. And I'm going to write one line about the grass. And I'm going to talk about, maybe even go to gratitude. Gratitude's a good place to go. Always a good place to go. Write about how it affects you, maybe why it affects you. Sometimes it brings up a memory, and those are fun things too. Follow it wherever it goes. And again, you don't have to publish it, please don't. But these are, it's like training for a marathon. Sometimes you run outside, you're on the trail, you have the train under your feet. Sometimes you have to go to the gym because it's raining. These exercises that you're doing where you're sitting inside and you're looking out and you're doing that, that's like running on the treadmill. Actually going out and sitting down and doing the work is running on the terrain. So I would say those little practice sessions, everything counts. The more you write, and if you can't write, if you wake up in the morning, you're like, I can't write anything, no words are in my brain, pick up a book. Pick up a book and read something. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it would be nice if it was something that fit with what you were hoping for. Maybe choose a writer that you love and start there. And then choose a writer you've never heard of and try that. And expand out your sphere of influence a little bit. But, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to respond to the last question. Something that worked for me is what's called Artist's Way. I'm sure.
Julia Cameron. Really good.
It's fantastic, and it will mess you up in a good way.
Yeah.
It's a 12-week program.
Yeah.
You go through things like have your 7-year-old self write to your 80-year self.
Yeah.
Have your 80-year-old self write to your 7-year-old self. Week 4, you are not allowed to watch any news or read anything.
I forgot about
that week will mess you up.
Yeah. She's hardcore.
And
it's 3 pages. Your morning pages are 3 pages long.
Every morning you have to write your morning pages, 3 pages. After 1.5 pages, you will have written about all your tasks and your laundry and everything you need to do.
Yeah.
And then you are going to start finding your voice, and it works.
Yeah. So good.
It's called The Artist's Way.
The Artist's
Google
Way,
it,
Julia
you'll find
Cameron.
it. Yep.
Yeah. It's pretty hardcore. So it's like if that's your thing, that might be a thing that like if you're super organized and you need that structure, do something like that. You can also take a class. Sometimes you can find really good, because some people like to write alone, other people like to write in a cohort. And that's kind of important for you to know too. What is your thing? Do you need to sit in a coffee shop? Do you like the sound around you? Discover it. It may not be the same for you as it is for everybody else. Annie Dillard also has a beautiful book about writing. called On. I think it's not. No, it's Stephen King is on writing. Annie Dillard's is called This Writing Life. And there aren't exercises, but there are things that I think when I read that book, it always brings me back to why I chose to start publishing, why I was writing and why I was publishing. So, well, thank you guys so much for coming out. I'm sorry I kept you a bit late, but I truly, truly appreciate it. It's an honor to be here with you guys, and thanks to Ancient Faith for indulging me in my weirdness. Thank you so much.